move into our agenda for our Tuesday, September the 1st school board meeting. And the first order of business under A1 is for our agenda approval. And of course, you have had an opportunity to look at the agenda, and a motion would be in order to approve the agenda that you have before you at this time. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All right, a motion by Ms. Morrison, second by Dr. Carter. Any discussions? Then we'll call for the vote. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion carries. Under A, I want to add a second item. We now need to amend the approved agenda to add H4 under new business, which will be Finance Committee appointments. And so, is there a motion to entertain that?
I move.
Been moved by Dr. Gupta,
Second.
second by Dr. Brennan. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, then we'll call for the vote. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, the motion carries. We'll now stand for our Pledge of Allegiance. We pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we certainly recognize that there has so much going on in our country at this time, and we certainly are grateful to each and every person who is doing anything to help our society to be what it needs to be. Having said that, we would now go into B1, and the school board needs to convene a closed meeting to discuss the following. As permitted by the Virginia Code, Section 2.2-3711A1, for the appointment or promotion of particular officers, appointees, or employees. Any discussion? Well, we need a motion to go into closed meeting.
Move that we go into closed meeting.
Been moved by Dr. Carter. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Morrison. Further discussion? We'll call for the vote. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion carries. And we will now go to room 206 for our closed meeting, and we will be right back as expeditiously as we can. Thank everybody. for the certification of our closed meeting. And this is necessary that we approve the certification of the closed meeting in accordance with the Code of Virginia, Section 2.2-3712D. The chair would like to entertain a motion that certifies that the Lynchburg City School Board in the closed meeting just concluded, nothing was discussed except the matter or matters specifically identified in the motion to convene in a closed meeting and lawfully permitted to be discussed under the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act cited in that motion. Simply need a motion.
I move that we certify the closed meeting.
All right.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Morrison, second by Dr. Carter, that we certify the closed meeting according to the code. And we will now go around and each person will say at this time, yes. So start with Bill Evans,
Yes.
Yes.
Morrison, Dr. Carter, Dr. Brennan,
Yes.
Dr. Coleman, yes, Dr. Nillis,
Yes.
Dr. Sinha,
Yes.
Dr. Gupta,
Yes.
Mr. Harvey.
Yes.
All right, and so this meeting was certified appropriately according to code. And I do want to thank us. Dr. Brennan and myself had the privilege of being a part of a chair and vice chair training with BSBA. And so we are just so grateful that our school board complies so beautifully, even better than other school divisions around the proper language. So thank you for that. We'll now move to Section C for public comments. And the school board may meet except in closed session as outlined in policy BBD by electronic communication means. So we understand all of those dynamics. And due to the COVID-19 realities, we are providing public access in such a way that our meetings are streamed live on YouTube and televised on Comcast 17 at 5 p.m. Meetings are rebroadcast daily on Comcast at 10 a.m. and 7 p.m. and available online on the LCS YouTube channel. In relationship to public comments, in accordance with the policy VDDH, public participation, the school board welcomes requests and comments as established in the guidelines within that policy and as modified to comply with the governor's state of an emergency. For persons or groups wishing to address the school board may do so by choosing one of the following: send a written statement to the school board clerk, leave a voice message on the school board clerk's phone line, provide those written statements or voice messages, or appear in person, and will be limited to 3 minutes per individual and 5 minutes per group. All written statements and voice messages must be received no later than 2 hours prior to the start of the meeting. And so having stated that tonight, we do have one person who would like to come before the board tonight for a public comment, and then I'm going to ask that Dr. Brennan will read those comments that have been submitted to us in a timely manner in writing. We have no phone messages tonight. Allow me to read this brief statement before Mr. Andrew Glover comes to us, representing conservative parents of Lynchburg. Persons appearing before the school board will not be allowed to campaign for public office or promote private business ventures and should not use profanity or vulgar language or gestures, make comments about a public official or an employee that are not related to his or her official duties, engage in behavior that disrupts the meeting or intimidates others, or address the school board on issues that do not concern the services, policies, role, and/or responsibilities of the school board. Individual speakers shall limit their comments to 3 minutes, and a person representing a group shall limit comments to 5 minutes, and you shall identify yourself and the group before you make your presentation. And of course, we always allow 30 minutes for these public comments in its totality. And so, Mr. Glover, we'd be delighted to hear from you at this time.
Greetings, members of the Lynchburg City School Board. My name is Andrew Glover, and I come before you once again as both an LCS parent and as a representative of the Lynchburg Conservative Parents Group, a group that has seen exponential growth over the last month in direct response to your refusal to give parents an option for face-to-face school. As a result, we now have over 100 members and families. Our 100 members adamantly believe that our children's well-being and education should be decided by the parents, and that for many families, that should include a face-to-face school option. We now have put the first week of our grand experiment behind us, and to be honest, it has been both overwhelming to deal with, while at the same time underwhelming to see the educational opportunity that was actually presented to students. Here is how one of our members recently described their concerns. Quote, "I am incredibly overwhelmed. This is just so much that I don't know. I just want to close the computer and walk away." Those words were used to describe the communication the LCS was providing parents just 2 days prior to the start of the school year. Now, 1 week in, the best synopsis came from one of LCS's own principals in the second sentence of the school newsletter when he wrote, "This is a strange new school year. No matter how frustrating, you made it through the first week of virtual learning." I am unapologetic when we proclaim that simply making it through is not enough. Our children do not deserve this. They deserve an educational environment where they can thrive. We were promised a system that would provide an adequate and comparable education for our children, yet the programs designed by the administration require as little as 30 minutes of effort from our kids each day. Here's an example daily schedule from Thursday for a second grader. Assignment 1, fill in 15 blanks for a number chart between 1 and 50. Assignment 2, count by fives to 120 while doing jumping jacks. Assignment 3, record a 30-second video telling me about your 3 wishes that you have. That was it. That's all there was for the day. In fact, the entire week, there's only about a dozen assignments to get through. But I want to use the next 30 seconds of the short window of time that I have to address you to share an audio clip with the answers to what those 3 wishes were from that student. Hopefully this is loud enough.
My name is Riley. My 3 wishes are that we can go back to school soon, that lunch will be yummy, that I can start racing again soon. Come on!
To which his awesome teacher replied, "My wish is that we can return to school soon, too." This is also a sentiment that was mirrored by my own first grade son and his teacher, and one that I've heard from every other teacher that I've actually spoken with. School board members, our kids are ready and need to return to school. Many of our teachers and our parents are ready to return to face-to-face school also. It is not too late to reverse course. The plans have already been made and are waiting for you to greenlight. Our kids can go back to school starting this week if you choose. After seeing last week's remote lesson, I promise you, you will not be interrupting much. Please reverse course. Give students the education they so desperately want and so desperately need. Please give parents the option to determine what is best for their children, whether that is continuing in their own remote-only program or taking the first step to returning to a normal and stable school environment. It's not too late, and this does not need to wait. Looks like I have a few seconds left. I do want to say one thing. This situation is absurd to me. I'm having to beg the school board so that I can send my son to school. How absurd is that? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Glover. We appreciate your comments this evening, and we will now hear from Dr. Brennan from our written comments.
Mr. Chairman, I will remove my mask just so I can be sure that the public can hear. So I have 3 emails that are directed to the board for the public comments. The first is from Gina Haskey. Dear Dr. Edwards, LCS School Board, Mayor Dolan, and Lynchburg City Schools. I am following up on a letter written previously. Our city's children need to be in school. I do believe that you all know this to be true from the hours I've spent watching the various board meetings, and I am urging you now to open the school buildings to our children. This is true for my own 4 children, our friends, neighbors, and all children we see out each day. I will spare you all of the unpleasant details of our own experience with virtual learning, especially for our younger children, but any of you are welcome to call me and I am willing to share our experience. I am not going to quote all of the CDC and other data that is available, but rather point to the obvious observation that the majority of private schools, child care centers, businesses, churches, and nonprofits serving young children are open with safety protocols in place. I strongly believe, as mentioned previously, that we have the space and resources in our city to begin in-person education for our youngest K-2 students immediately. This should be our #1 priority as a city. I realize this can only be done with collaborative efforts from the private, public, and nonprofit sector, and I do believe everyone in our community is willing to sacrifice for the sake of our children who deserve a high-quality in-person education. These collaborative efforts have been done over and over again in our city, and it is possible now with the schools for the benefit of our precious children. Please begin to open our schools for in-person instruction. Sincerely, Virginia Haskey. The second email, is from Heather Walling Brumfield, and it states, my husband Ken and I are working parents of 3 children, Ryan, age 7, Bryce, age 5, and Kinsey, age 3. 2 of these children are currently in the LCS system. Ryan is a 2nd grader with an IEP for autism primary and a secondary learning disability. Bryce is in kindergarten in regular education. To say this past week a virtual school was challenging is an understatement. However, we have had awesome teachers going above and beyond to help the kids. Bryce is trying to learn to read and write over the computer. This is his first year of school and really needs in-person school for academic learning. At this time, his interactions over the computer consist of a Zoom class where he hides under the table, he runs away, and he will not interact with the strangers he sees on the screen. At this point, he is limited to attending his Zoom class 2 times a week as a result of both parents working. It's not developmentally appropriate for a 5-year to learn in front of a computer screen. We as parents are trying to be flexible and considerate of what is deemed an appropriate mode for learning during this pandemic. However, the flexible option of choosing the best option for our children to learn in person or virtually was taken away from parents. As far as children with IEPs are concerned, they are trying to significantly decrease services by amending the original IEPs. The children's needs have not changed, and if anything, their needs have increased in the absence of services for the last 6 months. For instance, in the Zoom for Ryan, it was proposed to decrease his minutes from 180 minutes a week to 60 minutes a week. This is 100% unacceptable, and after much deliberation, we agreed on decreasing to 150 minutes. I am a strong advocate for my son, and I know that other parents have been persuaded and pressured into changing the IEPs as if they did not have a choice. I am standing up for all children that depend on these services to be successful in their endeavors. Whether or not all children resume in-person school, there needs to be in-person IEP services for those children that require them to be successful in school. This matter needs to be promptly addressed by the school board before these children fall further behind without the services they need. Ryan still has not received any services since the middle of March. Thanks so much for your time and consideration. We would appreciate our concerns being addressed in the board meeting this evening as well as directly. Heather Walling Brumfield.
Thank you, Dr. Brennan. Thank you, Mr. Glover. And we do want to say to our viewing and listening public that this board takes seriously all comments that we receive. We thank you for showing your care and concern by submitting them. We also want to thank our board clerk, who is very careful to share our gratitude to each of you for coming and sharing with us your thoughts and reflections. We'll now move to item D on our report, which is coming for information today on our finance report. Dr. Edwards?
Sure, and I'm going to ask Ms. Lukanich if she's here. She is. To come on in and kind of quickly review the finance report.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This evening, I'm going to present the finance report through July 31st of this new year. Our 2021 operating budget is at $98,108,191. The revenue received to date, we've received 1.59%. Our expenditures to date is 3.43%. I have included the detail for both the revenue and the expenditures. I would just want to remind everyone, this is typical because with your state revenue, you only receive your SOQ funded, so we're only getting partial state funding, and the rest will come, like our lottery funded won't come until January of 2021. So I'm not surprised to see that our revenue is less than our expenditures. And just also remember that the city will allocation, their appropriation comes whenever we need it into our account, and we still have the excess from last year that makes that up. So that's why you're seeing that number. One thing I did want to point out as well is that on the revenue side, the state has reconvened and our sales tax number has been lowered, the estimate. And I just wanted to make you all aware of that. They did decrease it for both years. We are waiting to see when the new calc tool comes out so we can see if anything else, if basic aid went up in its place. So we are still monitoring that. I've also included the health insurance summary. The ending balance as of July 31st is $622,562.34. That is subject to change as our beginning balance may be altered due to the our year-end audit process. Do you have any questions?
Any questions for Ms. Lukanich? Dr. Brennan?
Ms. McConnell, thank you very much. I have just a couple of clarifications, if that's okay. And you've already commented on one of them, which is the announcement from Richmond that they were going to remove the $500 million in new funding that they approved in March, and that they expect there's going to be about $190 million decrease in the sales tax. And I know we're going to keep track of that and see how we do. My first question is, I know that our average daily attendance, I'm sure this year is sort of challenging figuring that out, but that obviously dictates what revenue we do get from the state. When will that sort of be reported to the board or given so that we have some sense of where we're standing with our average daily membership?
Well, we usually look at the September 30th number, and we sort of gauge from that. So the triggers for finances, we look at September 30th, December 31st, and March 31st is what your final is based on. We are very mindful, and that is exactly why we took the schools portion of the CARES money, and we set it aside for just these unknowns. When you look at unlike the city's CARES money, ours has 2 years to spend. So when we received the projection that we were going to lose the projection was decreased for sales tax of $630,000 for this year and almost $620,000 next year. So that is over $1.2 million. And for our CARES, we were awarded the 3.3, but when you back out what gets allocated to the private school, we have kept hold of that $2.5 million, and that is just for that purpose. If the sales tax comes in lower, as well as any adjustments that we need to make due to ADM. So we are very mindful of that, and we are watching that.
Dr. Brennan, additional question?
Just a quick follow-up. Dr. Lechner, you stepped into that second topic, which are the CARES funding that we have. As you say, the $2.5 million we're holding on to in case we need it. And then Dr. Edwards gave a nice description last meeting about the use of the other funds. Have we used up the other $2 million, or has that been allocated for COVID mitigated things such as PPE and remote learning? Where do we stand with that?
Yes, sir. That actually doesn't come into our books. That stays on the city's books, and we are just processing the purchases through the city purchasing office and working with city finance very closely. To date, we have purchased teacher laptops, Chromebooks. For school nutrition, we have the hot cold transport carts and the flex carts for the grab and go, things that we need in order to keep our kids safe. And we are working on, we have the touchless drinking fountains, we have the temperature screeners. They are, and we put them first in the elementary. We're working on getting those in the secondary schools. We bought handheld thermometers. We have purchased online software to support EL and CTE for remote learning. We did purchase the Gaggle software for the safety management and the Speak Up module. That has been done. We are using those funds also to assist with the cost of the food delivery. So we were getting reimbursed for the fuel cost and for what we were paying the drivers and the assistants to deliver the foods to the children over the summer. We purchased the e-misters. I know Mr. Gasky did that demonstration. That came out of the CARES. We have another order for those. All the disinfectants that go with that. Plenty of hand sanitizers, their dispensers, the wipes. So we've been purchasing that, the gloves, masks, face shields, sneeze guards, and the COVID signage. We have purchase orders out there about 75%, and we have until December 31st to spend that money.
Great, thank you for that update. Thank you for keeping an eye on that.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Dr. Nilles?
Question on expenses on, looks like bus purchases. I recall we were going to purchase like 5 buses, and I'm guessing based on the budget number, it went up. Can you?
It does look like that. That is actually the purchases that we made last year, and when the plant shut down, that was part of the open encumbrances, the open PO at the end of the year. So you will, once the audit's finished and they agree with our encumbrance number, you will see that budget come in. That's that line item that you see every year. That's the prior year encumbrances, and that will fund those buses. So when we had, I think my last report, we had a little over, I think it was like $1.2 million in open POs. That will get added back to this operating budget, and that will cover those bus purchases, because that was primarily what that was for.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you, Ms. Laconich, for all of your fine work and willingness to respond to our questions. Thank you very much. We now move to agenda item E, which is our consent agenda. And I would encourage each of us that if we embrace this would include our school board work session minutes from July the 21st, our school board minutes from July the 28th, special board meeting, our school board meeting minutes from August the 4th, and also religious exemption. And I do just want to pause briefly to just indicate to each of us, this is fairly standard, but according to our code and our policy 711, we have to also make sure we have the name and the age of each person. And so we have that. Just wanted to make sure that everybody is aware of that information for 3 families under religious exemption. And we also have the Human Resources Report and the Human Resources Report addendum that you have included before you at this time. Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda?
I move that we accept the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
All right, it's been moved by Dr. Carter, seconded by Dr. Nilles. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries, and we would like Dr. Edwards now to make an announcement at this time.
Absolutely. Some good news. In our addendum, we have the appointment of 3 very special persons who are joining our family for the first time or moving into a new position within our family. So for Director of Human Resources, I'd like to welcome new to LCS, Ms. Flora Cardwell, who will be joining us in late September as our Human Resources Director. She has a wealth of experience in HR. She's had a private consulting business in HR. She's done a lot of work in Henrico, and we are looking forward to her joining us and being the next wonderful member of our HR team. She was fantastic just to talk to, and when you meet her, And we will do another meet and greet of just new administrators. You're going to absolutely enjoy talking to her and working with her. For our Director of Curriculum and Instruction, we have a familiar face in Dr. Allison Jordan, who has been with LCS since 2018 as a instructional supervisor, and she is being presented tonight as the Director of Curriculum. She does a lot of work with our secondary schools, has been her position, as well as working K-12 with our ELL population. So we are happy to have her join us as the Director of Curriculum and Instruction. And then finally, rounding out the team, another familiar face for Director of Technology is Mr. John Collins, who's been with us since 2013. John has served as a supervisor and our network engineer, so he is behind the scenes supporting our over 10,000 users and 8,000 devices that are out there. So we are happy to have him join us as Director of Information Technology. And I'd just like to welcome all of them to the LCS family and say congratulations.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards, and a lot of wonderful in-depth work going to bring the best professionals possible to move Lynchburg City Schools forward. Thank you, Dr. Edwards and board. At this time, we will now move to item F1 under our school board committee reports, and I do want to thank the board for working with us to move some of these committee reports to work sessions. And so we're grateful now for our Finance Committee report and the Finance Committee's new chair, Mr. Gary Harvey.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The Finance Committee met Tuesday, August 25th at 3:30 p.m. With a little bit of a surprise, I was elected chairman by the committee for the 2021 school year. I look forward to serving with Dr. Carter, Dr. Gupta, Dr. Nillis, and Dr. Coleman, as well as Dr. Edwards and Ms. Laconich. I want to thank Dr. Gupta for his service and leadership over this past year as our chair. The committee covered several items during our meeting. We established our upcoming meeting dates, and those will be shared with the board. We have scheduled monthly meetings. As each meeting approaches, in consultation with board members and the administration, if it's not necessary that we conduct the meeting, we will cancel the meeting at least 7 days before that scheduled date. We addressed outstanding concerns with one of our staff pay rates. We reviewed the status of our capital improvements. The administration reported that capital improvements are being completed on time and on budget. And a big special thank you to Mr. Steve Gatsky and Mr. Rick Thompson for their staff for their excellent work with our capital improvement projects. We discussed the special education maintenance of effort status and updates on that funding. We discussed the ongoing questions from the board regarding reporting of the healthcare insurance. The committee will be developing a process and schedule for regular updates to the board. Discussions centered around monthly versus quarterly updates and what level of detail might benefit the board. We hope to have our recommendation to the board during my October report. Since our meeting, Ms. Laconich has reached out to our health insurance representative and requested that he attend our September Finance Committee meeting to answer any outstanding questions and give support to the board. If any board members have any specific questions, or if you would like to attend this meeting, just please let me know. As we approach October, we will be, or September and October, we will be reviewing the most recent financial status and revisiting our ongoing desires to address the step increases for our staff. Our next meeting will be September 22nd at 3:30 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Are there any questions to the Finance Committee Chair coming to us for information today? Thank you for that detailed report and for the outstanding meeting that took place the other day. Very grateful and thankful. We're going to stay with Mr. Harvey, F2, Governor's School.
Okay. The Governor's School Board met on Central Virginia Governor's School Board met on August 5th. The 2020-2021 board chair and vice chair were elected and clerks were appointed. Ms. Amanda Smith from Amherst County Schools will assume the chair position. I wanted to thank the board and Central Virginia Governor's School Administration for allowing me to serve with them and for all their help and support during this past year, as I was a new board member and also the new chairman of the Gov School. The board established meeting dates and times. Most of those upcoming meetings will be via Zoom. The committee reviewed the attendance practices of each of the base schools. The Gov School collaborative learning teams contain both on-site and online learning. The board reviewed policies, at which time the director of Central Virginia Governor's School might suspend any on-site activities. LCS has 21 juniors and 21 seniors enrolled this year, and our next meeting is tomorrow, Wednesday, September 2nd at 1 o'clock via Zoom.
And any members of the board have a question for Mr. Harvey pertaining to the governor's school? Sounds like some good information, and we want to make sure that all of us are aware and maximize our efforts to support the governor's school. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Harvey. It moves us now to F3, the Laurel Regional School. Dr. Carter.
Okay, the Laurel Regional School held their reorganizational meeting August the 26th. And at that time, the superintendent of the Laurel Regional School will be Dr. Shook. And the board chair is also from Bedford, will be Georgia Harrison. And that will be until probably December. Will change because Dr. Shook is retiring this year. The follow-up, they're following our Lynchburg City school calendar. They went to in-person learning beginning September the 24th. Also, they were following the mitigation plans, and also they're working in cohort groups where certain students will be with just that teacher and that students for their remainder of the day. And they are also benefiting from the LCS nutrition with breakfast, lunch, and to-go dinner and snacks. And so everything is going well, and they're also partnering with a food program to also help with other types of food for the students.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Carter. Any questions, as that was for information concerning our Laurel Regional School? And once again, that's a lot of fine work and unique dynamics. Thank you for your continued service, Dr. Carter, in that area.
And Doctor,
Yes,
the
please.
partnership is food for thought. Don't want to leave that out.
Very good. I'm very familiar. We're familiar with food for thought. That's excellent collaboration there. Wonderful. All right. We will now go to item G for unfinished business. And I do want to thank all of those who worked so closely with this. On July the 9th, the Operations Policy Work Group reviewed the policy updates sent to us by VSBA, and those revisions to those policies that have been made that are before you today conform to the current state and federal laws and regulations, and the attached policies have been reviewed by legal counsel. School administration will provide now an overview of those changes and respond to questions during the presentation, and you see the updates as printed. Dr. Edwards.
Yes, so these are up for our second reading. They were on the agenda last month. The only difference is after our discussion about the school resource officers, the law enforcement policy was taken off, and we will bring that back after we do our work session in November for the MOU, SROs. We want to have a fruitful discussion on that. So everything else is the same as it was the last meeting, and I did not get any new questions since the last meeting.
I'm sure that all of us have had a chance to review these. This is coming to us to action. For action tonight, what is the pleasure of the board? Dr. Miller.
I do have a question.
Please.
When reviewing policy KBA,
Okay.
it references regulation KBAR, and I don't see that we have that regulation in place.
All right.
I will check for that.
So KBAR is what you're referencing.
AR, yes. Which is the FOIA officer.
Okay.
Is there a specific concern about that particular
Well, this policy references a regulation that we don't have.
Okay,
We will get it.
so we're going to not include that today, obviously, and bring that back before the board. Good look, Dr. Nillis, thank you very much. KBAR should have been here, but we have some more work to do on that. So that will not be a part of the action items for this particular matter on the agenda. Okay? Is there a motion to approve the operation policies listed other than KBAR and the other, of course, that we pulled that we will deal with later concerning SROs, et cetera?
I'll move that we approve policy EB, policy EBAB, policy EBCB, policy EDC, policy FB, and policy KKA.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Dr. Brennan. Again, all of those policies are listed before you. Is there any discussion? Questions? Hearing none, then we'll move for a vote. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion carries. And of course, we want to thank that Operations Policy Work Group for the fine work that you continue to do. All right, thank you for that. And Dr. Edwards, you have that cited for
Yes,
the
I was
future.
just emailing Barbara right now.
KBAR, good look. And all right, G2, our finance policies and regulation updates. This is also coming to us tonight for action, and the superintendent is recommending that we approve these policies. We've looked at them before, and you can see them listed. Dr. Edwards.
Yes, and again, I don't think we pulled any of these from the last meeting, and I did not get any questions. And Ms. Laconis just popped in. I don't know if she received any questions on finance policies from, and she's shaking her head no. So we can move them as cited.
All right, so
Dr. Cole, I'd like to make a motion to approve the finance policy and regulation updates.
all right, and so are you referring to DJ and DJF?
Referring to the whole batch.
DLC, JECY, R, the regulation, JECZ, regulation, JL, JLR is a regulation.
As well as DG.
And DG, custody and disbursement of school funds. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Morrison. Is there any questions, concerns, discussion? Hearing none, we'll move for a vote. All those in favor of the policies just stated, finance policies and regulation updates, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. The motion carries, and the stated policies are now been approved by this board. It now moves us to G3, which is dealing with the amended Special Education Advisory Committee. And of course, we know what the state requires of that, and you can see it so listed here. And so, Dr. Edwards?
Yes, and Mrs. Daniels-Bosher is up here to just tell us what's different from the previous committee.
Good evening, everybody. The SEAC committee actually was able to meet last Thursday through virtual method. We are not able to meet in person. And what they did was they actually elected new chairperson, which will be Sherry Merrill, and the vice chair is Sharon Foreman, and the secretary will be Tasha Saunders. So that was really the big update, and adding on the person at Hutcherson, which was not on the previous one. So it's just basically an update, and then we have our next meeting set for September. That's it.
All right, so this is for public information tonight, so.
This is for vote. It was informational last time.
Okay. All right, so we are now moving this for action. Therefore, is there a motion? Dr. Nillis?
Question. Can you explain to me the role or briefly the role of the community representatives and what their background is, maybe?
She is a parent of a student. When they can come off the board after their 2-year rotations within the schools, they can come a community member, and means that they can still participate as part of the board, be a part of, be chair, any of those things. But the way the bylaws are written for us, it's a 2-year rotation within the school.
So it's kind of a at-large
Yes.
school representation,
Yes.
sort of. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other statements? The chair would entertain a motion.
I move to approve the Special Education Advisory Committee
A second.
membership.
Right, Dr. Nilles has made the motion, seconded by Ms. Morrison, to approve the Special Education Advisory Committee. Is there any questions for tonight regarding this? Hearing none, and no discussion. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And we have approved the Special Education Advisory Committee. Thank you for your work before us, and you have our full support.
I'll stay for the next one.
Yes, she's
Very good. We now move to G4, which is an ongoing discussion on COVID in the community and a return to learn updates. And I do want to turn this over to Dr. Edwards, but Dr. Kimberly Sinha will also give a report during this section as well. Dr. Edwards?
Certainly. So thank you for the time to talk about this, and thank you to the public and everyone who wrote or came to speak, because we are listening and trying to address concerns, questions as we navigate this COVID experience. During these updates, when we have them on the agenda, we want to do two things. One, give you a sense of COVID in the community and how things are going, not only in Lynchburg City Schools, but in the Lynchburg community, and then provide updates on the return to learn implementation and other questions as we go along. So I am going to turn it over for just COVID in the community and to Dr. Sinha to give us just an update of that.
Well, it's in your board docs, but here's a hard copy of, I created a dashboard for us. And I had suggested that we have regular COVID updates since we need to know what's happening in the community before we can, to be informed and make decisions. So upper left-hand corner is just some indicators I've looked for and found that let us know where we're going. And a lot of these reflect changes since we last met. So they're over a 2-week period. So some of the numbers might seem big, but it's representing 2 weeks and what the direction is. So for example, testing overall had been going down, but it's starting to increase again. And our positivity rate had gone over 10, but now it's down around 7. So that's a really good sign. Our incidence rate is the number of new cases based on a 7-day average per day per 100,000 residents. So we're at about 24. So 25 gets you into high risk category. So on the whole, considering things are looking better. Our new cases per week had been dropping off, but they've increased recently. I suspect some of that's university, college influence. Yeah, that UVA model, I did check, Dr. Brennan had it. I did grab the correct one, and it looks really odd to me too. So again, I'm just trying to grab the latest model so we can see what they're predicting for the future. And then the second page of it is really just an explainer of what's in there. So it's sort of like, and this part will never change except for, I did have a little space for an age distribution at the bottom of the sheet. So you can see, again, early in the pandemic, it was older populations that were primarily impacted, and now we're seeing the real growth in cases is in the 20 to 29 group. And that bar will probably continue to rise, again, with the influence of the college-age population here in Lynchburg. We are a college town. So that's that. I did put in a footnote on the one that I grabbed from an article about Maryland schools going back. And the standard they suggested, which is consistent with what we had discussed in earlier conversations, that jurisdictions that have below 5% positivity rate and 5 or fewer daily new reported cases per 100,000 residents, which is the incidence rate, should be able to hold in-classroom instruction. So that's kind of the benchmark we're looking for.
Okay. What number did you say for incident rate?
5. That seems really low to me, to be honest, but I've gotten so used to seeing numbers in the 20s for our local area, so.
All right, thank you, Dr. Sinha, for this
Harvey has a
in-depth
question, I think.
information. Sure, for this information that you've given for us. I got you. For the information that you've given to us today, we appreciate that. All right, we'll entertain questions. Mr. Harvey?
Yeah, I was just wanting to know about that 5% rate. Is there a certain period that we're looking to sustain that before I'd hate to
Yeah,
hit a
typically,
5%
yeah, right.
and then it jumps back up again.
In a lot of things, it's 14 days. Maintaining it for 14 days, that's sort of the wide window for incubation period, and I haven't heard any changing conversations on that, but Dr. Brennan might know better.
No, I think it's kind of two things. One is below 5% positive cases, and then decreasing cases for 14 days.
Yeah.
So that trend you like to see.
Right.
So those are encouraging. Probably people have seen, but the news has been full the last couple of days with New York City, who is the one large metropolitan area probably trying to go back to school. Their percentage positive rate is unbelievable. It's like 1% in the city of New York and the state. And they're still having trouble, as we know, to sort of get things reopened because of the concern that still a lot of people have. But so less than 5%, I agree with Dr. Sinha. I think most people think that's pretty good. And that's what California is using for theirs. Lesser positivity and then decreasing cases over 14 days. The only not such good news currently is that Central Virginia has sort of gone over that peak and is coming down, but it's kind of plateaued out.
Right.
And we're still as high as we were back like in April when we were not doing well. So we're still not yet coming down, but we plateaued, which I think is a good sign. So, and I think this information that Dr. Sinha is giving us is great as far as an overview.
Mr. Harvey?
Yeah, so let me ask this question. If we understand we need to get below 5, and we understand that we're talking at least a 14-day sustained period, best case scenario for us to be looking at this again would be 4 weeks or greater before we could even really be looking at this, right?
I'm sorry, 4 weeks from now, or
4 weeks from now.
Yes.
If everything, if our community really does what we're being charged with doing to try to make it possible, then we're looking at possibly the next board meeting of looking at this issue again if we have great results.
Most of the models, as Dr. Sinha pointed out, really says October is when we're going to start seeing the levels get down low enough. So yes, it's going to be a while before we actually see where we want to be.
Okay, but our next meeting would be in October, right?
Early October, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just want to prepare the community for that, because from what I understand, that's what we're kind of looking at as our gauge to help us to make decisions. So realistically, we want to see these numbers improve before we really could tackle this issue.
And I have offered to update these also for our work sessions, which technically aren't business meetings, but because so much can happen in 2 weeks, and because, like I said, the 9-week period is going to end before we realize that. I realize we're right in the middle of only our second week, but it's going to come fast. And so we're going to be faced again with what do we do now? And so we need to keep an eye on these, so.
Okay. All right, I want to make sure I'm clear. Dr. Edwards, is there additional presentation that you have as well?
Yes, I mean, two parts. So I have a COVID piece and then I have a return to learn piece.
Gotcha.
So-
All right, any board members who have not had an opportunity to speak yet to the issue that Dr. Sinha has presented before us at this time, Chair would like to hear from anyone who has not already spoken.
Dr. Gupta had a question.
Yes, sir. Go right ahead, Dr.
I'm
Gupta.
going to speak today. So this report is good, but my question there is one size cannot fit all. We have 4 educational institutions of higher education here in Lynchburg. That brings in about 15,000 plus students into town. So positivity rate will be high. We go by that, we'll never be able to open our schools. So how do we take all these other variables into account when we make that decision? Because many of these school students may leave in November, many of them may leave in December. So we have a mix in our community which may not be there for the Maryland jurisdiction you pointed out or any other Central Virginia localities.
Dr. Nellis?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the 5%, and it's a number that's been out there, but we really need to take a look at what's going on in our community. The issue is there going to be a resurgence if we open up schools even at a low level? Even with all the mask wearing and the social distancing, and there's lots of areas around the country that have kids in school and they're not having trouble, but they're rural areas. There's a low incidence of COVID in the area to begin with, and there's other areas that opened up and they didn't do the mask wearing and social distancing, and all of a sudden they got hit with a slew of COVID cases. So, I think it's good to get, I think, maybe an update every couple of weeks as far as the board and see what's going on. But I'm watching the data too, and it certainly looks like the influx of college students is affecting the results. But we need to, what you'd really like to have is, well, what's the demographics? What's the incidence among the LCS cohort population? I don't know. And long term, this is going to be around. We have to figure out how to live life, including educating students in person, and whether we open up slowly or go, throw the doors wide open. I don't know, but I don't think we can, as a board right now, and we haven't formally decided that we're going to go with a 5% threshold. But it is, something we all have to consider. There's not going to be one right answer to this.
Dr. Gupta, very reasoned, thought through responses, Dr. Nellis.
The
Dr.
other
Gupta?
issue I have is we have institutes of higher education. 3 out of 5 have students living on campus right now. And they are still able to stay open within the CDC guidelines of infection rate. Otherwise, somebody will come and shut them down. So our students are not staying together after the classes. They go home. So if this residential complex universities are staying open, what are they doing? Which precautions are they using to stay in, and having classes and being able to retain students on campus? And I'd like to know what they are doing which we can do to keep our schools open, or maybe replicate their good practices.
Dr. Renner, you'd like to respond?
Sure. So I think we know what the schools are doing who did not do well with opening, which is what Dr. Nellis pointed out, is they were not following any mitigation guidelines as far as masks and social distancing. And the schools that are doing acceptable are following those guidelines. 2 quick comments. One is, I think Dr. Nellis is exactly right as far as, the percentage of positive cases is based on the fact that you're doing testing. And, we don't really know all the testing to be done. We just get positive tests in our area. We don't get that many, we don't know who's doing negative tests when they come back. So That's a number that's very difficult for us to have. I think the number of cases in the area, certainly that's a helpful piece. And we do know that the problem is it's the community spread. And other communities obviously have higher education facilities, and we're not unique to that. So we have to mix all those pieces in. But I also think, as Dr. Nils is saying, I think it's really true, this is not going to go away. We are going to have cases when we do open up. And I think that we need to plan for that. As we said for a long time, this is not a sprint, this is a marathon. This is going to be around for a long time. And I hope that we'll be able to, and I think what we're all hoping will happen with our system is that we will be able to open up and not have to shut down if we have 1 or 2 cases, because we're going to have those cases. And we need to have a system in place within the schools where we can address that adequately so that we can respond appropriately. Because unfortunately, not just in our schools, but in our community and other facilities, it's going to be around for a long time. We just hope that number will get low enough in the community to allow us to stay open. The other side of the coin is a lot of the schools will say if you get above 5%, or if you get above 5% of your classes or teachers that are positive, then you have to shut down. That's the other question. When you open up, what's the parameter to stop? And that's the other piece you have to look at.
All right. Is it Dr. Carter, Ms. Morrison, Ms. Evans? All right, we're going to go back to Dr. Gupta.
So let me come back to my point. The private schools in Lynchburg are still open, many of them, right? Is that right? So they're K through 12, similar to our situation. So what are they doing to keep them open? What's the case rate there, positivity case rate? How are they doing testing or not? So those are the practices we need to see. This data is good, but I like to see data specific to educational institutions, whether they are K through 12 or higher education.
Okay, well, the disaggregating of the data to whatever degree that can be done, but I know that we are looking into all of the science of this with the best information possible. And the reasoning of this board tonight is very sharp. I'm sure that this has been appropriately recorded. Dr. Sinha, Dr. Brennan, any further on this discussion? Thank you, Dr. Sinha, for what you have presented to us tonight and the manner in which we are careful to look at it. And of course, each board member can feel free to contact Dr. Edwards about any particulars of this as it unfolds. So we'll now move to the second part of this presentation.
The bottom part of the first part.
Oh, the bottom part of the first part.
So,
Okay.
because I knew that we would have a conversation,
Okay.
This is extremely raw data, and I say super raw because we are just keeping our internal contact tracing to the best of our ability. I will say the one thing that we underestimated in COVID, and I think we have a very good mitigation plan, and we are using excellent practices with social distancing and face coverings and no large group meetings and washing of the hands and sanitizer and all of that with our staff. Our staff is completely back as of August 4th. But the one thing that we underestimated was the amount of staff that would have to internally be almost 24/7 monitoring our COVID responses, inquiries. We had our interim HR director, our nurse coordinator. We started with 2, joined by Amber Gentry, who is also here, who is a supervisor. LaTanya Brown, who is a director, got in it as well because of the volume of inquiries. So I do have, and I'm going to caution everybody, super raw data. This is as Crystal's looking through things, Dr. Edwards looking through things. As of this afternoon, and I know it went up after I took a peek, we had 116 inquiries about COVID. So that's our staff contacting us with something COVID related. So 116 times that our staff had to say, okay, let's have a conversation first. Of that 116, I was able to get through 70 of them. I'm just kind of looking through the 70 that I could actually get through all the details of. 22 of those were staff saying, I may have symptoms of COVID. And when that happens, staff go home, they're not here. They check in with their healthcare provider, and depending upon what happens, they may be out for an extended amount of time. Some may get tested, but you may not get tested. If you have symptoms, they are saying of late, just do the quarantine. So that's staff who may have had some symptoms, some COVID-related symptoms, may or may not have been tested, but have been taken out of the physical building, I will say, and are at home, either quarantined or self-quarantined, or advised to stay home by their healthcare professional, which, since we are remote, is not as much of a challenge on the teaching end because most of our staff can access their information at home. It's a little bit more challenging on the operations end when your technicians are out and home because they can't do their work, they can't service, or your bus drivers or your nutrition workers. So there's some positions that are problematic. Okay, so that's 22 of the 70 that I read through. 43 of the 70 were around someone who was tested positive, not in our schools, not in our buildings. Well, one might have been in our building, or around a family member who either was exhibiting COVID symptoms themselves, a child, a spouse. And again, because of that close contact, and when I say around, I mean like for that 15 minutes or more, that intense around, with or without a mask, some of them. Again, these people are being advised, if your spouse has tested positive and you're living with your spouse and there's close contact, you should stay at home, self-quarantine. You may get tested, you might not get tested. In the beginning, I think they were advising everyone to get tested, and not everyone is getting tested. So those folks have stayed home and have self-quarantined or been advised to stay home. And again, since we are remote, it's not as challenging of a concern on the teaching and on the instruction end. And then since teachers have been back on August 4th, since we've had pretty much the full staff back, we've had 4 adult cases of positive COVID and 1 student case of positive COVID. So I would say, at least from the adult end, having 4, and we've been back full staff since August 4th with the mask and everything that, like Dr. Sinha said, we're living with COVID, right? We're not waiting for it to go away. It hasn't disappeared. And in those 5 cases that we had, we've sent out public notices. We're trying to be as transparent as possible. The difficulty is when you see your staff members are out, you don't know if they're out because they have been around someone who might have tested positive. You don't know if they're out because they may have had a fever. You don't know if they're out because they have a family member who's exhibiting COVID. You just know they're out. And then that might lead to a little bit of, we're having outbreaks of COVID when we're really not having outbreaks, although we are having people who are self-quarantining. And that's our safety plan, to definitely do that. With those incidents, what we have done is isolate the area, whether it is a classroom, an office, a pod of folks that work together. We are doing deep cleaning anyhow, but especially if we have a positive COVID test. And we're really sort of practicing how not to shut a whole school down. And if everybody really does what they need to do, even when, because I think it is a when we have a positive COVID test, we're hoping that once we get children in, we won't have to shut down a whole entire school building or a whole entire division with anything like that, and that we can isolate the cases as much as possible. So in terms of those good practices, and I do sit on a call every Tuesday with the private schools, the public schools in our area, and the colleges, and we all talk about what, and the colleges were great today in giving us an update on their strategies and some of their mitigation. So I just wanted the board to know what was happening in LCS, and we're not seeing transmission across our staff within our buildings with the entire staff coming back. So that was it.
Any questions for Dr. Edwards for the bottom part of the first part?
That was just a simple question. The one student who was positive, obviously students are not in school, so that student was at home and tested positive, was a community.
The student was participating on an extracurricular athletic activity, so he was around. And remember, we still have students who are working out. So was around a pod. But again, even with our extracurricular, the kids are in pods and cohorts so that we minimize the spread of, we're trying to minimize the spread of COVID using a pod cohort technique.
Thank you.
Any other question regarding the bottom of part 1? All right, we will now transition into the second portion of
Okay, for the top of part 2.
top of part 2.
We'd actually like to just start with a little video before I have Janine present. And if we could show the video. Thank you. So that was our first week of remote learning. And remember that this is something that we have never done before. So, and I'm sure school divisions all across the country who are experiencing this are in the same boat. But I would like to give kudos to my staff, my teachers, my administrative teams, everybody who's working with food, nutrition, technology, phone calls, Family Connect, all of that for giving their best and their hard effort to really make this work. We recognize, and it is tough for us too, we miss the kids. We do. Teachers miss the kids. Administrators miss the kids. We all want our children back, and I know that I am one who in the community is like, hey, wear your mask so we can get our kids back to school, because we need to get this under control so that we can get our kids back in school. I think, Dr. Knowles, you said whether or not we bring them all back or we bring them back slowly. I think I'm erring toward bring them back slowly. I did that with the staff, brought the staff back slowly. I'd like to bring the kids back slowly. And I know we said remote for the first 9 weeks, but I think I also said flexible and be ready to pivot is what we said to our staff. If we can get that decline and we can get our kids back in school, the quicker we start to do that, the better. That being said, we do have some plans to get children back into school, starting with our most vulnerable learners. And I've invited Ms. Daniels-Bosher, and also Dr. Jordan is here as well, to just give us an update on what September 8th, next Tuesday, may look like.
Thank you all again. For the first 9 weeks, the first 2 weeks, all special education students were remote, just like all their peers within the division. Starting next Tuesday, we are bringing in cohort groups, cohort A and cohort B. So there'll be a group of students there Tuesday and Wednesday, and another group Thursday and Friday. Transportation is working on those numbers as we speak. I've been in constant contact with Angel and Ms. Wooden all day today. And we're bringing in on Tuesday our most vulnerable children, which would be our students that are on functional program, who are our VAP students. Some parents have chosen to keep their students at home for their own reasons. They will continue to be learn virtually, but we will have cohorts coming in that are VAP students, starting slowly. Bringing them in. They will follow all safety mitigation plans for the division. They will be temperature checked when they come in. I'm working with Ann Bongentry on that. I'm working with Beth Morris on the food side of this, so they will eat during their day. The buses will be transporting high school, middle schools, and elementaries will come in at separate times to be able to keep the buses separated. And then staff is going to work once we can hopefully have all the names in the right places by tomorrow. The case managers at each of the buildings will be notifying the parents of which cohort group they're in. While they're in the buildings, they will remain within their classrooms, and that teacher They're not going to a lot of other parts of the building. They won't be mixing within, if it happens to have more than one class in the building, they won't be mixing with those classes, but they're going to stay separate. The hope is that these are entry-level 1 kids. We start out small and get through all the good things that will happen with this, and then be able to start bringing in slowly other students within the population. And we have these in cohorts so that they'll remain in the same cohorts when other students start to come back, so they won't have to switch cohorts.
And then she mentioned entry level 1. So the way that we are looking at our plan within the 9 weeks, even though we're on the 9 weeks, if we have to go the full 9 weeks, is we're looking at our vulnerable populations, as she said, students in the VAT program, possibly ELL students that also need some services. And then we're moving up to our youngest learners will be the next group of kids. So if you're really thinking, what are the chances that someone stays in the full sort of 9-week program if we have to go there, it's most likely going to be our secondary students that might go the distance. Hopefully we won't have to go the distance, but we're really looking at getting our babies back in school. We did some, and again, I'm all about that raw data today, so things that I have are just coming in. But just looking at our rosters, enrollment, and some of the things that teachers were doing and schools were doing, we're noting how many students were on their roster, how many have had a Zoom meeting with their teacher, some interaction with their teacher, submitted work either through the Seesaw or Google Classroom, or have completed some other form of communication, might be been by phone if they did not have the internet access. And I'm looking at numbers upwards in the 80s and 90s in terms of just our enrollment and contact. Zoom meetings are a little bit down, a little lower, depending upon the teacher, the classroom. They're more in the 50s and the 60% for Zoom. And again, we're collecting this data. It's very raw data. Some is by teacher, some is by school. But we're trying to see what our enrollment is, since that's going to be important for ADM, and then what is quality enrollment. So not just who's on the books, and not just, and I know there's some concerns that kids can just click and say, yep, I completed the assignment. But part of it is giving a minimum of 2 grades per week. So we definitely are looking at the assignments for the children and trying to make sure that we also, during the first week, what was most of concern for us is not to penalize children and families who, yes, school started, but for us, life is a little crazy and we can't get to this until the evening or the weekend, and please don't give us zeros and penalize us until you've gone through it and just at least had conversations with us. So we're reaching out to the families that we haven't seen as much activity with, but definitely keeping a handle on it. I am hopeful that next week the bringing in of children is going to go smoothly. We will continue to keep that data, although we may have to get a few more staff to help out our, I don't even know what to call it, COVID response team, because it is an all-day, full-time job, and they are here till 6 and 7 and 8 o'clock at night, just responding to folks. And that's in addition to the work that the VDH does as well. So I think that's pretty much the overview. Anything else you want to add, team? You want 2 teams there? Okay.
All right, questions from the board? Dr. Brennan?
Ms. Daniel, thank you very much for that report and for that initiative to try to get people back to school. It's great. Can you give us 2 questions? One, can you give us an idea of the number of students that would be coming back, and I guess maybe a number that have IEP? So this is a certain number of this total amount or a certain percentage, number one. And number 2, can you comment on the emails I read earlier, and we've gotten some other emails about concerns that IEP time has been cut back by the department?
What we're doing as far as the number is concerned, these are all students on my part that all have IEPs. So all the students that are coming back in for me next Tuesday have them. I'm not sure of the ELL specific number. And it's our VAP students. At this point, it is somewhere around 60 to 70 that we're trying to bring in. Some of that number, we've had some parents in the last several days that we were working to bring in, and then they called and said, no, my child's not coming. So there's some concern that came up. So some of that number has dropped just a little bit, but it's somewhere in that range. But I don't know the ELL number at this point.
For our English learners, we need to screen about 20 students who are coded right now as presumptive Ls. And that's a new code from the VDOE, and it is triggered by a language other than English on the home language survey. So we'll need to screen about 20 students to see if they qualify for English language services. We're looking at approximately 170 English learners coming into the building. I've looked at the numbers so much I can probably quote them verbatim without even looking at them. I think it's 56 students K through 2. About 60 students grades 3 through 5. Then we're looking at about 30 middle schoolers and about 40 high school students. And again, like Janine said, parents have the option to send students, but they can also decline. So we'll have virtual services the entire time. But we have teachers who are so excited about getting students back with them. We want to make sure that we can bring students in safely. We want to make sure we're being intentional about their age, but also their WIDA level. So we're looking at WIDA levels 1 through 3 to make sure that we're bringing in our students who need to really focus on language acquisition. So SPED students will come in first. Then we'll look at English learners. We'll look at our younger students. We're also working on learning kits to get tangible materials out into the hands of students. So I do want you to know that we are working, we are ordering things, we've got thousands of bags coming. Librarians are starting curbside pickup. We're gonna do some mobile libraries. So Lynchburg City, we're coming for you. Don't think that we're not going to bring you materials out into the community. So we want small numbers of students to come in safely, but we're also going to bring some things out to the community.
And as far as the IEPs are concerned, we're working with each of the staff to make sure that they're understanding all the guidelines that we sent out to them. Staying on a virtual platform all day, every day may not work for some students. So we've asked them to look at the direct services that need to be provided, as well as indirect services that may not be directly with the student, but making sure that those services are put in the IEP. So we're clarifying. I have talked to several parents today. I thought that my conversations with them went well, and they did not have any concerns once I got off the phone with them that we're trying to make sure. I just have conversations out to the staff to make sure that they're just following all the guidelines that we set up and making sure that it doesn't appear that we're not giving them services, but that we're looking at exactly how we're giving those. It may not always be in a Zoom 3 or 4 hours a day, but there may be other ways that we're working with them.
Thank you very much.
All right, if there are no other questions from the board, we do want to thank our staff for your responsiveness. I think that's a key word. As concerns are being presented to the board and to our administration, there is a quick response to doing what is best for kids. Flexibility and the ability to pivot is huge. So we hope that the public will understand. This is new to all of us, and we are going to do everything we need to do to meet the needs of all of our students during this remote learning experience. I want to thank each of you, and the chair would like if you all would oblige for us to take a 3-minute break, and then we can come and move right through H and move right on out of this meeting.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you all for your excellent work. We could take a 3-minute recess for a moment. I would appreciate it. Reconvene. Thank you all for indulging us for that. We will now move into our next segment of our meeting, which is our new business section, Section H. And under that, the first order of business will be item 1, instruction and program policy updates. And once again, I know that each of us have looked at these matters, and I'm going to now ask Dr. Edwards to review this for us.
Absolutely. So these are for first reading after IMP has met. And I have Ms. Bond-Gentry here to give a quick summary of some of them are VSBA updates, and others are just a review of things that were old, and then a new one for mask and face coverings.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This evening, we're recommending to the board new and updated policies from the Virginia School Board Association's policies on instruction and program. Points of reference, in regard to the VSBA updates, there are 2 policies, policy IGAF, which is family life education, and policy JM, which is restraint and seclusion of students. In those policies, IGAF, language was added by the VSBA to review the family life curriculum once every 7 years. In policy JM, was formatted according to other updated VSBA policies. In addition to JM, there will also be an annual review. In regards to Lynchburg City Schools policies that were up for a 3-year review, and there were several of those, all policies were reviewed for equity and pronoun changes, such as he, she, to they, and their. And in addition, policy JJAC, which is student concussion, and JJACR will be reviewed every 2 years per VSBA and the Code of Virginia. For the new policy, which is JHCCAZGBEY, mask and face coverings, this is a new policy that's been revised from another locale by our policy team. Please note that this policy does reference Student Code of Conduct in accordance to policy JFC, JFCR, JFCC, and also Standards of Conduct and Discipline for Employees in accordance with policy GBEZ and GCPD. At this time, I'd be glad to take any questions or recommendations for the committee to consider.
Thank you, Ms. Van-Gentry. Any questions from the board for further consideration for our next reading?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Ms. Evans.
We had been talking about this one because I was out of town for the last meeting, and Gary went. And when you look at this, and it talks about the face covering, and for those students who, if there's some reason that they're not wearing a face covering, and it says, I guess the question came down to if it's a medical reason and they cannot wear a face covering, is it our job still, like transportation-wise, do we have to make a separate transportation? Would a bus have to go back and pick somebody up on their own if they didn't wear? But now when I did ask, we also talked about we have vans and cars that can also be used in those circumstances. And I didn't know if we had a number, any idea of a number of kids who would qualify for that with their IEP, that transportation is going to be an issue and masks are going to be an issue.
We were really looking at the students with IEP where
Right.
their transportation is part of that.
Mm-hmm. And Ms. Daniels has popped back in.
Yeah. Okay.
I can add that for the students with disabilities that have IEPs, if they are not able to wear a mask and there's medical documentation of that, we do have to provide a separate transportation in whatever mode that would be. We've also, for some of our more vulnerable population who may have some difficulty keeping masks on, we've also working with those IEP teams to make sure that we're kind of teaching them why they need to wear it and working with them to keep it on. Because some of these students have been at home and it's not had to ever be an issue with having something on their face. And for some of these with sensory issues, it could be difficult for them. So we are working with some IEP teams as goals for them to be able to keep those on. But we would have to provide for the
So
other.
of the people who are coming in, of the students coming in, do we have that issue coming up for the?
Not for the students that are coming in as of yet.
Okay.
None of the staff of those that are coming in have that issue.
Okay.
Dr. Carter?
Well, that's okay. If there aren't any students right now with that issue, because if we're looking at providing like private, or if we have to contract with private providers to transport, that can be extremely expensive. And even if we have our own transportation, that means we're putting someone else at risk, like the transportation provider. And then what are the legal ramifications of that, and whether or not we can have the parent provide the transportation, or if there are other options. But if we're not, but I know we're looking at that, and that's some of our concern.
Right. We do and have in the past for various reasons, if we've had to have parent transport and provided them reimbursement for that in some cases where there was an agreement made between the two. So we've done that pre-COVID. But those are alternatives that we can look at, and we do have a transportation transportation alternative that we can work with as well as vans and all other things that On Hill works with. So there are some options to that.
Any other questions? Dr. Nilles?
I guess it's more of a comment. The requirement that 2 or more students waiting at a bus stop need to wear a face mask strikes me as problematic to enforce. You know, if they space themselves 6 feet away, I mean, you see kids hanging out at the bus stop, and it's hard to believe. I find, anyway, they're outside, and I mean, how do you enforce that? I mean, what's the consequences? It's like, I mean, I get it, you know, coming onto the bus, you better have your mask on, but.
Right. So part of that we want to do in teaching kids, just in training. And I will say, just having been out in the community, I'm really proud of our students. I mean, they're wearing their masks outside in the community. So, and when we do get students back in, one of the first things we are going to do is do the training with them so that they understand that. It is difficult to enforce if no one is standing at the bus stop, no LCS official, I should say. But we're hopeful that parents are our partners in this, and that parents will help us keep kids safe as they are waiting at the bus stop. But it is difficult to enforce if we're not there until the bus pulls up.
Dr. Carter would like to weigh in.
That was a concern that was expressed too, how it's enforced, or will it be enforced? But then the other thing is, we want to make sure, because that if they come to the bus stop with the face covering on, then upon entering the bus, they won't say, oh, I forgot it, or I left it. So then you're already prepared. And then hopefully students will empower and hold each other accountable. That's a learning curve too. Absolutely. Yes. And we're not really looking to make this so punitive, but we're just trying to make sure everyone is safe and also prepared to get on the bus with a face covering.
And we are in constant conversation with divisions that have started in-person learning, and whatever's working for them, we want to know. So you know me, I'm on calls all the time, and just trying to use best practices as to how they are getting kids to follow directions. I did hear today that kids are pretty easy in terms of getting them to comply with things, especially when you get them to buy in.
Right, that's the key.
Anyone else? Dr. Edwards, with the mask and face coverings and the addressing to Are there any particulars about the mask in terms of,
What's
is the
on?
mask supposed to be cleaned every day, or is there someone who examines the condition of mask?
We had not put the mask examiner in there, but I mean, you do bring up a good point in terms of our training and telling kids how often and how frequently. And as a matter of fact, one of the ones that I'll talk about later, it comes with instructions as to how often they could be washed up to 15 times before having to be discarded. So I think you bring up a very valid point in terms of us making sure that kids and staff have proper mask and mask hygiene, I'll say that, or face covering hygiene. The other thing is, should we determine that, you know, whatever I'm wearing, it doesn't look that safe, we will have disposable masks available, because our goal is to keep our kids and staff safe.
And that's excellent. The connection is clear. So anyone who has any challenge in that area, we'll be able to provide. Mr. Harvey?
I just remembered, and Dr. Carter might chime in on this as well. Under the cross-references for some of the policies, didn't we suggest that also address
What can
student
be on?
apparel? Because that covering of what types of things might be considered inappropriate?
And I think if I recall my conversation with Ms. Brown, one of the cross-references is the Student Code of Conduct,
It is.
which discuss that any clothing or things, so you can't have anything up here that's disruptive to the school environment, and the staff as well. So it should cross-reference those policies. I didn't look.
That's
Yes.
what
They
Okay,
do.
yes.
talking about that.
That's correct. That's the cross-reference there for also employees and also student conduct, yes.
Okay. Dr. Carter?
Can we add this to the consent agenda?
Are we okay with family life education, IGAH? Everybody okay with that? There's a thought to move this to consent agenda for next meeting. We can always pull it, of course.
I'm okay with that.
The entire batch, correct?
The whole thing, right. The whole thing. All right, very good. Well, that's interesting. Very limited discussion here, Dr. Edwards. That's good. Thank you, Ms. Van Gentry, and everyone for helping us with H1. Thank you very much. All right,
Thank
with
you.
that being stated, we will now move to new business, H2, which is dealing with the appointment of the designee or designees of the division superintendent for the 2020-21 school year. Board members, as you are aware, in accordance with section 22.1-76 of the Code of Virginia, it is necessary that the school board appoint a designee or designees of the division superintendent for the said year, and this enables the school board to approve a designee or designees of the division superintendent to attend meetings of the school board in the absence or inability to attend by the superintendent, and the chair would be willing to entertain a recommendation to approve Kimberly D. Lukanich, Chief Financial Officer, and Amy Pugh, Deputy Superintendent, as the superintendent's designees. Is there a motion?
I make the motion to.
All right, it's been moved by Ms. Morrison that we appoint the said persons as the designees of the division superintendent for 2021. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Carter. Any further discussion on this matter? Hearing none, we'll move to the vote. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries, and we want to congratulate Kimberly D. Lukanich and Amy Pugh for being the designees of the division superintendent for the 2021 school year. Thank you very much. At this time, we will now move to H3, which is the appointment of voting delegate and alternate delegate for the Virginia School Boards Association. As many of you are aware, the VSBA virtual convention will take place November the 18th through the 20th and on November the 19th. By the requirements of VSBA, each local school board must have a delegate and an alternate. And for the last 3 years, I have not been able to serve as a delegate in various ways, and neither can I serve this year. Last year, I believe Sharon Carter served as an alternate to board chair Susan Morrison, and Dr. Carter is willing to serve this year as our voting delegate, and Ms. Morrison as our alternate. What is the pleasure on the board of this matter? We must approve this tonight because we have reached the deadline for submission.
I'd like to make a motion to nominate Dr. Carter as our designee as our delegate for the Virginia School Board Association, and Ms. Morrison to be the alternate delegate for Virginia School Board Association annual meeting.
Thank you for making the motion, Dr. Brennan. Is there a second to that motion? Ms. Evans will second it. Is there any discussion on this matter? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor of Dr. Carter being our delegate and Ms. Morrison our alternate for the 2020 Delegate Assembly indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion carries. And thank you, Dr. Carter and Ms. Morrison, for your willingness to serve. We now move to item H4, and in this particular item is being brought to us tonight, and I do want to acknowledge a note that I received from Dr. Gupta. Dr. Coleman, due to the increased time commitment in my professional work, I would request that you kindly accept my resignation from the Finance Committee. I do want to acknowledge that Dr. Gupta has done an exceptional job, a brilliant mind in the area of finances, and will continue to be. I don't want to go into too much detail, but he is exactly correct. He is doing an incredible job in his commitments in his professional career, and with regret, I accepted his resignation. And tonight, we simply need to have appointments to the Finance Committee to be made. If you remember in our organizing meeting that Dr. Nillis is the alternate, and he is willing to serve on the committee in place of Dr. Gupta, and Ms. Morrison is willing to serve as the alternate. What is the pleasure of the board tonight with the appointment of Dr. Nillis to the Finance Committee and Ms. Morrison as alternate?
I move that we do make that decision.
I second that decision.
So it has been moved by Dr. Carter, seconded by Dr. Brennan, that Dr. Nillis will now serve on the Finance Committee and Ms. Morrison as an alternate. Is there any discussion? I would just like to have brief discussion. Thank you, Dr. Gupta, for your ongoing work. No fluff in my statements. Thank you for your work, and you will continue to serve. All right, if there are no other discussion, all those in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the motion carries. And thank you, Dr. Nillis, for your willingness to serve on the Finance Committee, and Ms. Morrison as the alternate. Thank you very much. We will now move to item I on our agenda, the superintendent's comments.
Yes. So before I say my comments, I just want to acknowledge that our attorney, Hope Towns, is in the back in the house here joining us, and publicly thank her for all of her work, especially with policies and everything to keep us legal. Thank you, Hope. I want to say thank you to this board, because I know you must receive an enormous amount of emails and phone calls and things all day, every day. It has been a very interesting time in education, but I appreciate all that you all do to support us, to work with us, to work with our parents and families. We will get through this together, but I feel much more comforted that we're all in this together as we get through this together. So thank you for that. Couple other quick thank yous. I received a nice little package of these wonderful, they're smaller for little people masks. And according to our policy, what is it, KHZ-R, any gifts that are valued over $5,000. Now, you might not think that this is a $5,000 mask, but when I tell you that Gleaning for the World, Jean Smiley Mason has given us 10,000 of these. So, yes, and they are already on their way to here to be distributed and ready for our kids. So I would like to thank Gleaning for the World for their special donation to us, and I would happily accept that on behalf of
indeed.
the board. So thank you, thank you. And in addition, also in our hallways and on our way to our schools and to our buses and to our kids are these wonderful little bags from the city of Lynchburg. And inside, we have a disposable mask, some other face coverings, lots of sanitizer, and all of this is courtesy of the city of Lynchburg and our partner in Piper, Van der Peer, the emergency program specialist at the city of Lynchburg, who has put together, again, this kit is not $5,000, but when you have 2,400 of them for your students, they donated to us for our families. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We will be getting those out to families. And that's just a small token of just the community support that we have for our kids and our families. So thank you, community, for being patient with us as we work through this. And again, we will get through this together.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards. That was a very lucrative superintendent comments that you have shared with us today. All right, thank you. Board comments. We'll get started around the room. Ms. Evans?
First, I'd like to say happy birthday to Susan.
Oh, thank
you.
And to Rose for the EC Glass mask, love it. I would like to say, kind of as a board member though, and also as a parent of a student at EC Glass, I understand the overwhelming need to want to have your kids in person in school, because I think we're all there mentally, that we know that that's what they need. But the teachers, and I can just speak for EC Glass, for Jimmy, have been amazing. The work that he's getting, the communication with the parents from his teachers. I think he thought from the spring that this was going to be a breeze and he was just going to work right through everything, and it came crashing down yesterday when he realized that we're actually learning and he's moving along, and the work that they have put in has been amazing. So I just want to say thank you.
I want to thank all the teachers and all of the LCS staff, because I think that they really have gone above and beyond what I ever expected. I'm a grandmother to 7 public school students, and 4 of them in Lynchburg, and they are working hard. So thank you to the teachers and to Dr. Edwards.
And I want to give a shout out to RS Payne for their staff. I've seen them several times leaving the building. A lot of times, as soon as people leave the building, before they even step out, they're already ripping their face coverings off. But they leave them on, and they're walking to their park. And I've seen this 2 or 3 times, so I just want to give a shout out to them. That tells the neighborhood and the people that see that we're really serious about what we're saying. Is not just for the students, but for everyone. And also for one of the we're talking about the community input is just great for Gleaning for the World in the city of Lynchburg, but neighborhood support is also great. And just to highlight one of the local centenarians that turned 108, and she was a neighbor of RS Payne. So, and that's the wealth of information that you and the support you have from your neighbors is always great. The other thing is the crisis plan. I missed this when we were talking about that, but I remember my first year getting those crisis plans. It was like, what in the world? They were all different, and they were all formatted differently. And I remember asking, can they be consistent? Consistency is key. And these crisis plans were awesome. And the best one was Heritage High School. That was over the top. It was so informative. And the consistency is very important because we have teachers that move around to different places, and leaders also. And especially now when you may move to any school, so to know that you have a consistent plan and a consistent way to do it is so great. And I told Dr. Edwards that, and I think Barbara Saunders is the person behind that, so just give her a shout out. And just the remote learning, this is the time now for students to really defy the odds. Don't just accept that there's going to be a huge gap. Motivate yourself. This is the time that you can stand up and you can learn as much as you can and just go further and aim for higher higher learning, but don't let life pass you by. It doesn't have to. At the same time, for remote learning, I just was in a webinar and they talk about, I thought about this, and it really is true, how you really have to look at your surroundings. And everyone, when you're doing remote learning or Zoom meetings, you have information in the background, so you need to be cognizant of that. And some students, CPS or Child Protective Services has shown up at their door because there may be a perception by whomever is doing the Zoom that they may be in harm's way. So just be cognizant of that. Be aware that you really need to look, just devote a space or spaces that you can do this in a way that doesn't reveal a lot of information or different things, and that your background doesn't look so cluttered or whatever the different things are. But just to be cognizant of that when you're doing these Zoom meetings. And I know a lot of times it's a good thing now that I know one of the speakers that was talking about, she's part of the coaches, how this is a new day for everyone. And this is a new day for teachers to be aware of just the students that are there. They may not participate because they may not be in a place where they can. They may be the only person in a place and they can't get up and jump around because it may not be appropriate at that time. So don't just say, you got to get up, because you never know where they are. They may not be able to participate fully, and just to be aware of each child, and maybe you need to ask later, or why aren't you participating, or just be delicate with those situations.
Brennan?
I would like to echo what Ms. Evans was saying. We have our nieces are juniors and seniors at Glass, and the teachers have done a phenomenal job. And a special shout out to Aaron Reed, who is the chairman of the Department of English, who sent a wonderful video to introduce the students, but also introduce the families. It was just really awesome, and it was great. And then I also want to comment to the families and who have contacted the board about getting back to school, and let them know that we all want them to get back to school too. We just want to make sure it's done in a safe environment for the students and for the teachers.
Thank you, Dr. Brennan. Dr. Nilles?
No comments.
Dr. Sinha?
Well, I echo what others have said. Really proud of how the division has come around in a very short amount of time to re-engineer pretty much everything we're doing and see the opportunities and the silver linings in it. And I hope that our students can find some silver linings, as well as our parents. I know it's hard on everyone. It's hard to teach your own kid. There's just a different dynamic there than when it's a teacher who's a teacher. Anyway, and then just a shout out to Principal Womack at Sandusky Elementary. Had an issue where I thought I was going to be registering my granddaughter for school there, and I thought it would be a day till I heard back from him, because it was just late in the game, and he got back to me within minutes, and very pleasant and kind and accommodating, and just really, I just felt like I was the only person in his world. And anytime you can make a customer, if you will, feel like that, that is a very good thing. So kudos to him, and again, really impressed with the work that everybody's doing and the IT support that is being provided to everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta.
Happy birthday to my chairwoman, Ms. Morrison. Very many happy returns of the day. I'm praying for Dr. Coleman's father, who had a surgery today. These are on personal notes. But as I said before, what I'm finding out is COVID is going to stay with us, not for weeks, maybe for months, maybe for a year, maybe longer. So as we design this return to learn plan, we need to keep that into account. How long are we going to keep the schools closed, knowing that it is there, it will be there, and it is not going to fade away in 8 weeks or 6 weeks or 7 weeks. So as we plan, we should start understanding the reality and plan with that reality in mind. Thank you.
I just want to send a shout out, to all of our staff, teachers, for doing a phenomenal job. Our schools are not closed. We're just remote learning, and it's a little different for all of us. I've dealt with plenty of parents who have engaged with teachers. I think parents probably struggle more with IT issues than the kids do. But that's a special shout out that I wanted to send to our IT department and to our folks on the phones that are answering these calls and helping people through their issues. Because I know how frustrating it can be on my end of things when I'm doing something wrong in the computer. I can just imagine how frustrating it is for someone who's trying to help somebody like me. So a special shout out to them for all they're doing. And I also wanted to say a special shout out to TC Miller as they're preparing for hopefully one day being able to have students learning in person, but they're doing a phenomenal job at their remote learning as well. So, you know, again, to all of people who are working really hard, I hope that our community will be patient with them and be flexible with them, and remember that our teachers and our staff, they're learning too. This is different. It's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's just a different thing. And if we can all be respectful and flexible as our teachers and our staff are trying to get through things as well. So.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. I want to again welcome all of the new directors that were announced. We're looking forward to the great work that is coming forward. We do want to acknowledge to all of our families and students that we realize that you only get one shot at whatever grade you're in at the present time, and particularly those who are in high school, student athletes, if you will. We're doing everything we can. As it relates to the public, we do want you to know that your comments are not falling on deaf ears. We are really working. We have an outstanding cooperative staff, administration, Dr. Edwards' leadership, and we really are doing what we need to do. We realize that there are some students, African American students, other groups who have challenges, etc., and we're working on it, and we will do everything that we can. And then the last thing I want to say, I'm excited. When I look around this room, every board member is doing something, leading something, putting input into something, and this is exciting. And we want you to continue to do the great work that you're doing. And that now brings us to item K. Please be advised that we have a September the 15th work session. What has impoverished our meetings, if anything could? We haven't had the luxury of our student reps yet, and we're looking forward to that. So at our work session, we want to have some dialogue about how we can make sure that we are continually developing student leaders who can interface with this board around important matters, as well as professional development opportunities for the board. And of course, our next school board meeting, a regular meeting, will be October the 6th, 2020 in this room. There are other things, and of course, we're communicating about that on a daily basis. Now, that moves us to item L, closed meeting. And I do want to acknowledge that pursuant to the Code of Virginia, Section 2.2-3711A1, the school board needs to convene a closed meeting for the purpose of discussing the following specific matters: the superintendent's evaluation. The chair would like to entertain a motion for us to move into a closed meeting. All right, Dr. Brennan has made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Carter. Any further discussion on it? We understand why. Very good. Call for the vote. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion carries. And we will take about 3 minutes to clear the building for our closed meeting. We'll stay in this room. Thank you all very much.